It's Saturday, and welcome to another episode of PO Cubed, your chronological guide to Nintendo's handheld consoles. My name's DD Ash, and this week we're playing Snow Bros. Jr., Marble Madness, The Hunt for Red October, Castellian, and Mickey's Dangerous Chase. Let's start the show. Snow Bros. Jr. DMG-SJ, developed by Dual Corporation and published by Naxatsoft in Japan and Capcom in North America and Europe. Here come the madcap Snow Brothers. Well, no, actually. Being as it is a Game Boy game, Tom has mysteriously vanished in King Scorch's Ice Palace. More chilling news, that's the manual's pun, not mine, the sun is burning out. Now it's up to Nick to rescue his brother and save the heart of the sun. Snow Bros. Jr. plays virtually the same as the NES version, with only a tiny handful of gameplay elements taken away. There are 50 floors to this palace, with a boss every 10 floors. You play as Nick the Snowman, whose goal on each floor is to wipe out all the enemies by encasing them in a snowball and then punting them before they break out. If it sounds an awful lot like Bubble Bobble, that's because it is. You jump with A and throw little snowballs with B. You fire an infinite barrage of snow clods at the enemy. Each one takes 4 or 5 to completely encase them. You can stall them with 1 or 2, which also makes them temporarily harmless, but to be able to kick them, you need to fully trap them. The cool feature about this comes when you kick the ball. They will fly from side to side across the level and drop down through holes, taking out other enemies along the way, before ultimately splattering on a wall. You gain a small points bonus for each wall it rebounds off. It's possible to clear whole stages out by doing this, which is incredibly gratifying, and each enemy you run down gives a little bonus sweet or potion, so it's worth trying to do. You can hit a trapped enemy from underneath to knock it up to a higher level, meaning you can potentially kick an enemy from the very top and hit all the others on a level. If you manage to clear out all the monsters in one shot, these dollar bills float down from the top, giving a ton of points. Another inventive little mechanic that comes along with this is Nick can hitch a ride with these fast-moving snowballs if he stands in the way of it. It doesn't hurt you, and you can jump out of the ball at any time using A, but it's a cool and occasionally useful way to move about the level. I briefly mentioned the potions that drop when you chain hit enemies. They're actually hot sauce. I'm not going to get into the judgment of a man with a largely frozen constitution to eat something that would exacerbate his melting. What these do is increase the size of your projectiles, meaning fewer are needed to encase the enemies. There's also one that speeds you up. Once, a bottle turned the character into a massive floating version of himself. I assume this allows you to deal instant damage, but seeing as how I've only seen it one time after I cleared the level out already, I can't be certain. The levels are mostly one screen, and there's no screen wrapping like in other games of this style, until the later levels. I adore the sprite animations. Rather than just jumping like all other platforming mascots, Nick does a kind of parkour front flip thing. It doesn't affect the movement in any way that you wouldn't expect, but it looks nice. If you partially trap an enemy but they then break out, they'll shake off the cold and snow with a stunned shiver. Again, it doesn't mean much, but it's a cute little touch. There are lots of different enemies, some of which fire at you, from birds to monkeys to these goblin-like creatures. They all have slightly different movements, but are all killed in the same way. The bosses are inventive, but the general principle is that you ball up the little critters that they spew out at you, and then pelt them back at the big guy. The controls are perfect, and the difficulty curve is exactly right. I like that the snow you throw kind of follows gravity a little. It'll go along horizontally for a bit, but then drop downwards. Pay attention to this because if you position yourself just right, you can actually trap enemies patrolling a lower level than you. Useful in a pinch. This game has become more sought after in the past few years. It's going for a pretty penny. Ever more so the more people realise how great it is. It's not nearly at the astronomically ridiculous height of the NES cartridge yet, and as this version is probably better anyway, I certainly would buy Snow Bros. Jr. if you ever get the chance. It's one of those that I wouldn't mind spending a little more on, because it's so addictive. The controls and gameplay fit the console perfectly. You can play it in short bursts, it uses the entirety of the small screen. The cutscenes tell the story of the war after every boss, and they look bloody gorgeous. This is one that you need, I would say. Do I like this better than Bubble Bobble? I think I actually do. So good.
When you're ready for a real challenge, you're ready for Marble Madness. There are deadly steelies, marble munchers, acid pools, digital waves, vacuum cleaners, catapults, pistons, pounding hammers, killer birds, and they're all after you. Do you have what it takes to reach the silly maze where everything's upside down, or the ultimate maze where even the maze moves? Do you have what it takes, or will Marble Madness make you lose your marbles? Marble Madness. And coming soon, Jordan versus Bird, one-on-one for your Nintendo.
Marble Madness DMG-MB, developed by Tengen and published by Mindscape. From the darkest recesses of an architect's fever dream comes a port of one of the more unique arcade titles from the 80s. The aim is to skillfully control this marble to the end goal of increasingly tricky obstacle courses. The stages are laid out in a three-dimensional isometric style. There are plenty of opportunities to smash your marble to bits by dropping it from too high a height or off one of the sides into oblivion. It'll always respawn where you lost it, but this takes a few seconds and the time limit is pretty strict. The quicker you beat a stage, the more time you'll have to carry over to the next one, so you need to make haste even on the easier levels. There are these things that look like slinkies but are a kind of leech that eats your ball, and patches of ooze that slither about that you need to avoid. The first thing to get used to is the gravity. Your ball gathers speed pretty quickly when going downhill, and correcting its motion takes a great deal of precision and skill. It's quite impressive how responsive the controls are. It's certainly not easy, but you never feel conned because of bad controls. The original arcade version used a trackball to control the marble, giving a full 360-degree directional movement. Obviously, the home ports, of which there are many, use a D-pad for the most part, but the feeling was usually replicated well. You can choose between 45-degree or 90-degree controls. The 45-degree one requires you to push down to move the marble diagonally down and to the left, leaving right to move you diagonally down and to the right. I can never get my head around this scheme for isometric games, because the levels are laid out diagonally, but you don't press the arrows diagonally to move it that way. Not a fan at all, but different strokes and all that. Choosing 90 degrees allows you to move left by pressing left, and so on. Sure, you'll be holding two directions a lot of the time, but you won't have to overcome that natural instinct of wanting to move in the direction you push. There are 5 levels in all, which loop until you eventually run out of time. They all go from the top corner down to the bottom, except the final stage, which runs the other way. Gravity's been reversed here as well, meaning the marble accelerates up the hills. The Game Boy version of Marble Madness is really rather good. I'm not massively au fait with how processor-hungry a game that looks like this is. Maybe it's not at all, but the system pulls off the isometric effect really well, and a game that had the potential to be hard to visualize actually looks great. The light and shade is more emphasized, which compensates for the lack of color while retaining the depth. The classic atmospheric soundtrack is done well. I've always got a strange The Adventures of Mark Twain vibe from the sound and aesthetics in Marble Madness. No idea why, and it's no different here. A faithful representation of a game that's always hard to beat, but is certainly unique, and is 100% skill-based from start to finish. It seems like something that should be easy, but it's really not. Not for me, at least. I don't know about you, but I'm such a klutz in this game, and it often leaves me feeling like there's something wrong with my basic motor functions.
The Russian disappeared. invisible.
This thing could park a couple of 100 warheads off Washington and New York.
Stolen.
He's defecting. The Russians know this, which is why they've been trying to seek him for the past 2 days.
The hunt is on.
Now you want us to help you hunt him down and kill him?
Battle stations.
Give the man a chance.
From the director of Die Hard.
Torpedo is an acquisition.
From the best-selling novel by Tom Clancy.
We sail into history.
The Hunt for Red October. March 2nd.
The Hunt for Red October DMG-HF, developed by Beam Software and published by High-Tech Expressions in North America and Europe and Ultron in Japan. On November the 12th, 1984, approximately 4 months before Mikhail Gorbachev took power in the Soviet Union, a Russian Typhoon-class submarine surfaced briefly in the Atlantic, just north of Bermuda. It subsequently sank in deep water after suffering massive radiation leakage. Unconfirmed reports indicate some of the crew were rescued. According to repeated statements from both Soviet and American governments, nothing of what you are about to see ever happened. Whoa. In this rendition of a classic Sean Connery movie, you control Red October, the submarine, through 8 cavernous stretches of ocean. You basically need to get to the end of these underwater cave systems without getting blown up, where you'll fight a boss. There are lots of other submarines, battle cruisers, helicopters, all sorts of nasties trying to stop you. They're totally ruthless too, and don't give you a second's respite. You fire torpedoes back at them with B, and also have a limited supply of stronger homing missiles that you fire with A. The controls are similar to Choplifter 2 in that pressing backwards, i.e. the opposite to the direction you're moving in, one time will allow you to reverse while still attacking in that direction. Pressing it a second time turns you around. The physics are suitably underwatery, with a decent drag feeling that means momentum will build over a short time rather than being instant. The bosses are a little strange. Some are little more than sequence fights where you have to destroy parts of a huge construct in order, removing layer after layer until the battle's done. Others are your standard monstrous creation that's both bigger and vastly stronger than you, but can still be taken down with your ordinary fire. The music is decent, but my word is it repetitive. You'll be hearing that small collection of tunes again and again. The explosions are done well, which is fortunate as there are a lot of them in this game. I don't mind the graphics. The radar is very helpful and looks great, and the hit detection is very good, which is an achievement in and of itself because of how irregular the rock formations are. It can't have been straightforward to program that. Sure, what you're looking at isn't amazingly varied, but it can definitely be put in the good drawer. There is a reason that I won't be playing The Hunt for Red October too much after this review, however. It's not the presentation, which, as I've already said, is decent. It's not the storyline, because while it doesn't follow the plot of the movie that much, other than the start sequence, the source material is a great film and lends itself excellently to an atmospheric experience. No, the biggest problem with this game is the difficulty. It's so unforgiving. I've got to level 3 a couple of times, but never further. It's just too hard. Now, I don't mind challenge, as I've said many times, but I feel like a little kid getting picked on by the bigger boys. The Soviet forces are relentless, brutal bastards who are everywhere. It doesn't matter if you can see them or not, because they'll just wipe you out. I only got as far as I did by playing the coward, hiding in crevices and sneaking out when there were no rockets heading my way. Progress is almost completely reliant on collecting power-ups. There are ones that heal you, ones that give you more missiles, a caterpillar drive thing that stops the enemies from spotting you for a short time, and occasional extra lives. The thing is, these can be destroyed by enemy torpedoes, or even your own, which is infuriating. Enemies take several hits to destroy, you have to be face to face with them, and they're firing back at you. It's nigh impossible to take out a sub with your ordinary weapon without taking damage yourself. The unforgiving level of difficulty makes this more stressful than enjoyable, and that's not what video games should be about. Castellian DMG-CJ, developed by Bits Studios and published by Trifix in North America, The Sales Curve in Europe, and Hero in Japan. Also known on some platforms as Nebulous, Castellian is a somewhat unique platform game where you play as a pig, frog, mouse thing called Julius. You have to climb to the summit of 8 colossal towers and plant D-bombs, it's not rude, to bring these alien constructions to the ground and save your island. As Julius climbs and leaps across the face of each tower, he is confronted by hordes of geometric enemies such as the spherical eyeballs and spheroids and hexalons. And guess what shape they are? So rather than climbing the interior of the towers, you're working your way around the perilous edges, trying to avoid these enemies and dissolving platforms. What sets Castellian apart from an ordinary platformer is the level layouts. The sprite of your character doesn't move as such, but stays rooted to the center space of the screen, and the tower rotates behind you clockwise or counterclockwise, giving an impressive level of depth. It doesn't sound like something that would work on the Game Boy, but it's surprisingly effective. You can shoot something called carbono bombs, a weapon purported to be made from a substance harder than diamond. You have unlimited ammo for these, and they can be used to take out certain threats and remove flashing blocks from your way. Still, not all enemies are affected by it. Some you'll just have to hide from or otherwise avoid. Any contact will knock you down to a lower platform. If you end up in the sea, well, you die. It's hard to swim with no arms, I suppose. The dissolving platforms have no telegraphs. All of a sudden they'll just fall from under you. Your only choice is to memorize their location. The tower has several doors that lead you to other parts of the tower, and elevator platforms that you press up or down to activate while stood on. Get to the end of a level, a big ask, and you can enter a bonus stage, whereby you run from left to right as quickly as you can while also collecting jewels. This gives you extra lives, but the quicker you complete each stage, the more bonus time you can take into the following tower, so they're worth doing. It all sounds like something that could work, and sure, the game was reasonably popular on home computers. The problem here is the obscene difficulty. You can't ever expect to beat a level without having first died 100 times, getting slightly further each life, and just learning the whole thing by rote. It comes across as a puzzle game, but there's little strategy to be had anywhere. You just move about as quickly as you can in trial and error fashion, trying to avoid the ridiculous onslaught of shapes flying at you. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention that this game has one of the stingiest time limits I've ever come across. If you fall but one time, there's basically no way you'll get to the top. When you run out of time, you die. When you die, you start over. No checkpoints anywhere. Sorry to say, Mr. Pig Frog thing, you're on your own with this one. I don't care about your silly little island enough to put myself through Castellian. Mickey's Dangerous Chase DMG-MC, developed by Now Production and published by Capcom in North America and Europe and Kemco in Japan.
Oh gosh, Minnie, I have a present for you, haha!
You can guess what happens. Big Bad Pete has stolen it. So, enlisting the help of Goofy, you need to progress through the levels to get it back. Starting off in Mickey's hometown, you soon find yourself in a shopping mall, crossing a lake, through some woods, up a mountain. They weren't kidding with the name Dangerous Chase. The game strongly reminds me of the fantastic Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers on the NES, a game that I really wish made it to the Game Boy. You can control either Mickey or Minnie, and in the same way that the chipmunks could pick up crates and apples and hurl them at the enemies, you can do the same here. Pick up a block and lob it horizontally or vertically at an enemy, and they fly diagonally off the screen. There are lots of stars scattered across the levels, of which if you collect 100 you get an extra life. There are stars and health pickups in special blocks, 4 of which per level also harbour these treasure orbs. If you can find all 4 and then complete the level, you get an extra life. The screen scrolls from left to right, and you can only backtrack a very short distance, so if you overshoot a bonus orb, then I'm afraid you're not getting it. The third level sees your mouse in a speedboat on a lake, having to avoid rocks and flying fish in an auto-scroller to Goofy on the other side. That's the thing, Goofy's always waiting for you at the end of the level, which makes me wonder why he's making Mickey go through such an ordeal. When you finally get to fight Pete at the end, he's a joke. He just jumps back and forth, hide on the right-hand side of the screen, and he throws balls the other way. There's no AI, just a strict, unwavering pattern that he follows. There's a nice variation of enemies, from angry dogs to flying squirrels, from snakes to bears. The game looks lovely with a real Disney charm, detailed backgrounds and cartoonish sprites. The music has the same quality you expect from a Disney game. It's no DuckTales, but then not many soundtracks are. There's enough variation in the gameplay elements to ensure you're not just repeating yourself. A solid title that finally gave Mickey something interesting to do rather than just going around a castle collecting keys. Something of a relief, I'd say. If they're anything like this one, I'm looking forward to reaching Magic Wands and Ultimate Challenge. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/portablepowerpodcast. Or subscribe on the YouTubes. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.